think last cycle was really the first cycle that this data became actionable for anybody to any degree.
I'm Eric Wilson, managing partner of Startup Caucus, an investment fund and incubator for Republican campaign technology. Welcome to the Business of Politics show. On this podcast, we bring you into conversation with the entrepreneurs who build best-in-class political businesses, the funders who provide the capital, and the operatives who put it all together to win campaigns. Today, we're joined by Adam Meldrum, president of AdVictory, a political media buying and audience intelligence firm. Adam has worked on a ton of campaigns. To name a few, you've got Nancy Mace for Congress, Ben Sasse for Senate, Bill Lee for governor, and a number of party committees and PACs. In our conversation, we talk about the new technology he's excited about to put to work in campaigns this year, how he stays at the cutting edge, and how to sell innovation in the Republican Party. Adam, each election cycle, it seems like you're working at the cutting edge of where new technology interacts with politics. This year, that's automated content recognition, which we'll call ACR for the rest of the show. What is it, and why are you so excited about it?
Automated content recognition, funny enough with acronyms, it actually kind of very well describes what it does. It recognizes content on screens. So as people consume media, as they watch TV shows on smart TV devices, as they watch commercials, as they engage with internet content, over-the-top connected TV content, any of those images that show up on a screen, automated content recognition captures those data points about users and helps us do a whole bunch of things about measuring what's on people's screen, measuring what people consume, categorizing those people into audience data, actionable audiences, so we can target them with other digital programs and that type of stuff. And I'm just really excited about it because, so much of this space has always lived around offline data and matching offline data, onboarding offline data, voter file data, and targeting, or leveraging, third-party data segments from third-party data providers, cookie-based data. And as we know, that stuff's just going away one way or the other, kind of continues to regress for how much we can use it. And what this data does, very similar to how you understand and glean insights from what people search online, how they show intent, what websites they visit, what kind of articles they read. It's all contextual based data. So it's real world data of what people are engaging with and choosing and opting in to watch and seeking out, and how that can tell you about audiences that you're interested in and how you can reach them. So it takes away the modeling and the data intelligence work, which is very valuable, but it adds a whole other layer to that where you're able to kind of glean insights about what people are actually doing in the real world to inform things about them. And those two things working together, are really powerful. It's not a one or the other type of thing. It's getting those two things to work together that really give you, powerful measurement and powerful insight. So that's why I'm really excited about it.
So help me understand, you're getting this from like the cable set-top boxes or like your Roku boxes? Is that where you're getting that data from?
This comes from the manufacturers of the smart TV devices. So this is technology that's built into your LG TV or your Vizio or your Samsung device. Those OEMs are the people that actually control these data, and it's opt-in. So when a user sets up a smart TV device, there's so much in the space these days around privacy of data and privacy with that type of stuff. When you set up a smart TV, you actually opt in as part of the T's and C's that you go through when you set up a smart TV. You're actually opting into allowing this data to be actionable by these device owners. So it's actually the hardware built into the device that owns the ACR data, and that data is licensed out or used by those manufacturers to inform audiences, inform targeting, and that type of stuff.
Wow. So I should have paid attention the last time. I was really excited to get a TV and I just wanted to skip through everything.
Yeah, I think people, those T's and C's on websites and on TVs and on donation pages and all that stuff, there's a lot buried there that folks maybe aren't too excited about after the fact.
So I think that will surprise a lot of our listeners that their TVs are not only recording everything they watch, but sharing it with other people Help us understand, how does that data actually come to you? Does it say like, oh, here's Eric Wilson's file, or is it like a big spreadsheet? How do you actually get it from the manufacturers?
It's anonymized data, so that's one thing. I think the legalese that goes along with any of this, cookie-based data and that type of stuff that's always been part of online tracking and online measurement is anonymized to some degree, or to a high degree. So I think that's one thing that people should feel comfortable about. But the data comes in the form of measurement analytics in one way. So we're able to see kind of in broad macro lenses how many times a commercial showed up on somebody's screen, or how many times, are they a regular weekly watcher of a daily watcher of the nightly news, or do they only watch on the weekends? And you get, kind of macro level aggregate stats about people's media consumption patterns from a measurement point of view. So really looking at a lot of this data, one way you look at it is from a measurement and analytics point of view, stats and statistics and all that type of stuff. And the other way that it comes is in audience files. So if you wanted to say, from a political campaign example, we would like to build an audience of everybody who's seen our opponent's TV ad. So your opponents, are on TV. They're buying broadcast TV, cable TV ads that are showing up on voters' screens in the district or in the state. And as a campaign, you'd like to conquest and say, I want an actionable audience segment of people that have been exposed to my opponent's TV ads. So that data then comes as an audience file, very similar to audience files that come through to target on Facebook or in a DSP, a demand side platform from a programmatic targeting environment. And those are actionable audience segments that you can target. And those could be people that have seen an opponent's TV ad, people that have seen your TV ads as a campaign. You could suppress, those users, those viewers of people that have been exposed to your TV ad in your digital program, so that you're using your digital dollars more efficiently and saying, we only want to reach people online that maybe aren't being exposed to our TV ad. That's more of a cord cutter, not a broadcast viewer, not a cable viewer, and that type of stuff. So it comes in all those different ways.
So let me just get this straight so I understand it, which is, let's say I'm a candidate and I'm running for office. I run a TV spot. I can then go to the ACR data and say it was watched on 100 different TVs in this zip code. Is that kind of the level of data I can get?
That's exactly right. Yeah, you can get, what's the average frequency? What channel is driving the most kind of reach? Are you able to measure, and pick up incremental reach of from an audience perspective of people that are seeing your ads on one station that aren't seeing it on another? Now, you got to remember, it's only a slice and dice of the population. It's only people that have these smart TV devices, people that have opted in.
Conditions.
Yeah, I didn't read the terms and conditions and that kind of thing. So it's a sample to some degree, just like Nielsen panels are a sample to some degree too. But if you look at, a Nielsen panel of 10,000 users or 10,000 viewers or something like that, you're getting, millions. At the last kind of count, I think there's about 80 million smart devices in the US right now. 7 out of 10 households have one of these smart TVs. That doesn't mean everybody's opted in, but that market share is only growing, as you realize when you go out and buy a new TV. These are the kind of TVs that people are buying.
Is that how they're getting so cheap? they're selling our data?
I don't know how that. I think technology always has a downward force as the market kind of evolves, but maybe that's one way they're monetizing and offsetting the cost. That's to some degree. Yeah, that's not my business.
Yeah, we're looking at it from like an ad measurement perspective. But one thing that just occurs to me in our conversation here is that I could then use it from I see that, this sample of voters were exposed to this story that's unfavorable towards me, or maybe unfavorable towards our opponent. And, maybe that was an opposition research hit or something like that. Could you use it for earned as well?
Yeah, I think so. I think particularly in the, in the public affairs space, that's a big use, maybe a little bit different than political campaigns, because you have, news coverage or stories that get tied to a brand or a corporation about something, in the oil, natural gas industry or the tobacco industry. There's a big expose on, tobacco use on 60 Minutes or something like that. And people that watch that program, that might be of interest to, people in more in the public affairs kind of space.
Or if I watched the Netflix documentary on Boeing, for example.
Exactly right. And that's the great thing about it, is that it's a measurement point that's kind of agnostic to the to the medium or to the delivery method that you're getting the content. So, it's anything over the top. It's anything on linear broadcast. It's anything on cable. It's anything on YouTube. It may be a gaming console. It's anything that shows up on the screen. So, previously all the measurement, the problem with it all is it's all been siloed off into the delivery channels, the delivery method of which the media is coming through. That's where the measurement is siloed off. Now you have this thing that's actually living on the device, so it's capturing across all those different things. So while it's not perfect and it still has a long way to go, it's kind of a more all-encompassing measurement and agnostic and a little less biased to that degree than maybe some of the other stuff that's been out there before.
So we're obviously in the thick of primary season for the 2022 midterms. What types of campaigns need to be looking at this tech right now and making sure that they're using it this year?
Well, I think it's naturally inclined to benefit larger scale campaigns at this. I think last cycle the data was almost, and it's a testament to how quickly this stuff evolves. I think last cycle was really the first cycle that this data became actionable for anybody to any degree. And now this campaign season, I think you're certainly able to see why a statewide or a super PAC initiative or a national campaign would have more use for this data because they're measuring against things they're doing on more robust media mixes. So they're on broadcast, they're on cable, they have robust digital programs going. Their opponents do too. So there's a lot more to glean in and out of not only what you're doing, but what your opposition is doing in those larger scale campaigns. And I think they can look at it from a very, very ongoing kind of storytelling narrative of what's going on in a race and how people are being exposed to media and consuming it and what that can mean for their targeting strategies week by week, day by day, month by month as you go through a race. But then, a smaller campaign, I think could be very simple with it. I don't think it has to be this complicated, big barrier to entry type of tool. Very simply, if a campaign, wants to reach people that watch the nightly news, but they don't have money to be on the nightly news, with broadcast TV in a state legislative race or a congressional race, but they want like heavy news consumers. There's certainly online segments that are available for that type of stuff, but an ACR segment of that type of data could be a very, easy data segment to access and target in a cheaper digital manner. And that might be a very valuable audience for a smaller campaign.
So the data itself kind of scales and can be as expensive or affordable. I mean, does it get into a price point for some of these like state ledge campaigns?
I think there's probably minimums. The data is accessed through partners that have access to the data. So you have technology shops, you have, the Samba TVs, the Sambas of the world and those types of things. You have bigger digital agencies that have access to this data. So at some points there might be, minimums and things like that. But any campaign that's working with any kind of, digital agency that has access to these tools should be able to access it at some level.
So what are some of the other measurement tools that campaigns should be looking at that maybe aren't ACR?
It's a great question. I think brand lift is not a new tool by any means. I think it's underutilized. I think it gets underutilized because so much of campaigns are driven by the traditional understanding of what a poll is and how a poll asks questions and how a poll returns data to make decisions in campaigns. And brand lift studies aren't a poll, right? They're a measurement of how people engage with a single piece of creative and a single piece of creative between people that have been exposed to it and then an unexposed audience online. So it's measuring the difference between how your media, how your creative is driving impact between people that have seen it and people that haven't seen it. So I think there's all kinds of cool things that Google's doing. Third-party brand lift providers, Facebook, some of those have a higher point of entry price point about how to use them. Google's fairly low for how to access it. But if you can kind of measure how people are responding to creative, the news cycle moves so quick. There's so much thrown at people these days. And polls do a good job of capturing a significant sample of an electorate. But how people are responding to specific pieces of creative in the digital space, to me, is a really cool data point that a more granular digital strategist might be able to use and convey in a campaign and add to the measurement narrative and add to how decisions are made with those types of data points if they can have a bigger voice at the table with those types of things.
You're listening to the Business of Politics show. I'm speaking with Adam Meldrum from AdVictory. Adam, we know that political conventional wisdom and is really slow to change, and there's a lot of inertia in the way we run campaigns. So how do you identify and recruit these early adopters to try new tech?
Campaigns are notoriously slow, as you mentioned, in some ways, and that's not their own fault in a lot of ways. But how a campaign budget is presented to the decision makers drives a lot of how decisions are funded and made. So figuring out ways, I think, to insert this type of stuff in a campaign budget as a line item that's more familiar, that goes along with things that the campaign strategists and candidates and decision makers are used to seeing, I think is one way that's very helpful. The more you start to interject new types of things in campaign budgets as line items that folks aren't used to, the more pushback you usually find. So, I think the nice thing about some of these digital measurement tools is that they go along with media buying and digital media or broadcast media. So they naturally, I think, kind of evolve into just parts of the service. And that's slow, that's cycle to cycle. And it takes, I think usually presidential campaigns drive a lot of the technology innovation in political campaigns. So as presidential cycles happen and things get adopted at a presidential level, now you have all these operatives that are exposed to it. The technology maybe becomes a little bit lower barrier to entry in the next cycle. So it kind of waterfalls down. And I think as long as the campaign is open-minded, a candidate is open-minded, and that stuff kind of naturally evolves from cycle to cycle kind of in that way.
Yeah, it strikes me as we talk about this all the time. You want your product to be a painkiller rather than a vitamin, and measuring the efficacy of what we're doing is definitely vitamin in that it's good for you, but is an add-on. So, one thing we see in these political startups is that there is that push and pull between what customers want right now versus what we as innovators know that they are going to need in the future. I'm curious to hear how you balance that, where you obviously need customers to pay you because you're running a business, but you really want them to pay you for the thing that you want to create. And so how do you reconcile that?
I think building into the workflow, how you communicate the data is really important. I say this, to my team all the time, especially in the digital space. How you communicate what you're doing, from a process point of view to, hey, we're putting a plan together, and hey, we need your feedback on this, or hey, the ads have started, or hey, the ads have stopped. Just that basic communication about what you're doing is so important to how the client is receptive to it and how success is perceived. I jokingly say that you could be running the worst digital program or the worst media program for your client in the world. You could literally be wasting their money, making bad decisions with it. But if you communicate, the phases of it in a good way with good visualizations and prompt updates, the clients most of the times think it's great because they don't know any better. And you could be running the best digital program for your clients in the world or the best media program for your clients in the world. But if you're failing to communicate it well to them, they're often frustrated and they don't understand. Now, obviously, you want to be doing the latter in that example rather than the former. And I say it more as a joke, but how you communicate and tell the story about what you're doing, how it's impacting people is second to none in terms of the importance of how well clients perceive it. And I think if you do that in a way, you can make clients understand the value in it, and you can figure out different ways to monetize, the service for that. I think, trying to get consulting retainers and getting people and campaigns more amicable to paying consulting retainers to these agencies that put so much time in. So, so much of this has always been structured on, the media buy and a percent of the media buy, and that's where you make your money. And the media buy doesn't happen in force until the end of a campaign in large numbers. So it's a very hard, as most of the listeners to this show know, it's a very hard business to cash flow and stabilize the revenue for. But you're adding so much value along the way in terms of understanding audiences at different phases of campaigns, in terms of building lists and fundraising and that whole other side of digital and the performance metrics of it. And then ultimately to where that pays off, to where all of that stuff comes together from a measurement point of view, from an intelligence point of view, to where those last 60 days of a campaign, the public tunes in, everybody pays attention, and now you're really going to drive impact. I think if you can communicate value along the way and kind of get that more stabilized revenue as a consultancy, I think that's one good way to do it. And one thing I've tried to do, it's labor intensive because people want you on the phone, and they want kind of regular feedback from you, and they want regular intelligence from you and insight, and you have to prove the value, and that's tough to do. But I think that's one way to do it and think about doing it from a business perspective.
Yeah, and I just want to underline something that you said there, which is you've got to tell your own story. If you're not telling your customers how the impact that you're making and how you're making a difference, no one else is going to do that. And so I think a lot of people think that eventually the customers are going to come to you and demand this really cool stuff, and they'll finally recognize that you were the one who was doing it all along. We just don't see that working, because one of the big challenges facing political entrepreneurs is the long and cyclical sales cycle of campaigns. How do you stay top of mind with your customers throughout the year?
It goes back to that communication point. I think there's always ways that you can be in front of your clients with insight, with intelligence. Last cycle, I spent a fair amount of time doing a lot of stuff around social listening. And social listening, I think, is maybe a poor way to talk about it in the political space. It really comes from the brand world and how brands started to realize they could.
It's such a nebulous sort of idea. I think that's the challenge, because there are all kinds of social listening, right? I think that's its challenge.
But the root of it is it kind of goes along to the point I made earlier about the contextual data that comes from how people are engaging and doing things in the real world. What are they searching for? What are they watching on TV? Are they reacting positively to or negatively to it? And how does that interface and intersect with what a campaign cares about? So in the digital space, related to audiences and related to media consumption and related to those kind of contextual things, there are these ongoing, I made the example that it's an always on focus group to some degree. People are putting stuff out there in this world all the time that give us signals into how they feel, how they react, how they like, how they dislike things. And there's no perfect, it's not a thing you hit, export and it gives you just really clean report. And it gives you a poll with, percents and positives and negatives and crosstabs. It's really an ongoing story that you have to read into, and you have to figure out how to understand it. You have to figure out what you can glean from it. But it's there, and if you can be the person understanding that and telling it to campaigns or telling it to your clients on an ongoing basis that adds value along the way, then I think that's put you in a good position to stay top of mind, to figure out new ways to monetize those types of services, either as a consultancy or on more of a transactional level. But it's certainly not easy. It's certainly not cookie cutter. But I think smart people figure out smart ways to do things with data. And there's certainly no shortage of that these days.
The one resource that campaigns never run out of is unsolicited advice, right? And so in a lot of ways, social listening is geared towards that. Adam, if you weren't working on AdVictory right now and some of the other projects you've got going on, what's a problem or challenge you tackle with a new startup?
I think I'd love to figure out a way to streamline the information flow in campaigns more. There is so much clutter and there is so much that comes at folks, and there's so much that has to be rehashed and recycled, for people to understand what's going on in campaigns. There's this kind of pie in the sky that's always been out there in the campaigns for how could you create this one all-encompassing dashboard that showed everything, and that folks could log into and just see what's going on from a voter contact perspective, from a measurement perspective and polling, and from a media consumption point of view. And I think the problem that's always presented in that from being a viable solution is that everybody's trying to overcomplicate it. And they assume that you need more granular level of detail than you really do. But I would love to just be able to kind of have a cycle to step back and think about that problem from a really high level, and make it as simple as possible, and come up with a solution that kind of took, really everything from a top line perspective, from all the different kind of communication and measurement stuff that's flying around a campaign, and how could you present that to people very simply and easily, and have that add value along the way. So I'm not even sure whether that's possible or not, but I think it'd be great if somebody figured out that problem.
Got it. Well, some good ideas there. I want to thank Adam so much for joining us today. I really appreciate his insights. You can learn more about him at his website. Link is included in our show notes. Please remember to subscribe to the Business of Politics show wherever you listen to podcasts. And if you learned something at all and it made you a little bit smarter, please share it with a friend. And if you're a super fan of the podcast, I really, really would appreciate it if you go leave a rating and a review on Apple Podcasts, because that's the number one way that we grow and more people find us. And with that, we'll see you next time. Thanks for listening.